It's Lucy Litch, and this is Tiny House Conversations. It's the Australian-based podcast where I interview experienced tiny houses, tiny builders, and adventurers in the tiny world so you can discover how to create, build, and transition into tiny life. Welcome back to another episode of Tiny House Conversations. Today I'm speaking with Bryh Joy and Cris Edwards, who are interior designers based in Tweed Heads in New South Wales, and are also tiny house builders that aim to provide a uniquely different tiny house service with genuine care for their clients. Cris and Bryh were on the show back in episode number 20, talking all about the first tiny home they were building with no experience. I wanted to have them back on the show because so much has happened since we last spoke. They completed their first tiny house build, took it to the Tiny Homes Expos. They've been getting great feedback and are now building more tiny homes for clients. And in this conversation, we talked about the lessons, experiences, and funny stories from the build process of their first tiny house, which many call the best tiny home in Australia, the interior design approach they take with their tiny house builds, what makes them different to other tiny house builders, and the direction they're headed with their business, Big Life Tiny Home, the different tiny house models they offer and how much customization is possible, and lots more. I always love chatting with Bryh and Cris. They're so much fun and they just bring a great energy to everything that they do. So on to this tiny house conversation with Bryh and Cris. Bryh and Cris, welcome back to Tiny House Conversations. It's so good to have you on the show again today.
Hey,
we're happy to be here. Thanks for having us. Happy to share our
journey.
I can't wait to dive in with you ladies because, you know, if some of the listeners didn't know, I actually had you both back on the show in episode 20. And at that time, you know, you shared with us all about the mission in tiny house building as women. And back then, I know you were just kind of starting the building process, if I remember correctly. And you've been documenting your whole journey on your social media pages, YouTube channel. And I know that so much has happened since then. And you've probably got a lot of different stories and lessons and experiences to share. But I wanted to start with, just in case anyone hasn't gone back and listened to episode 20 yet, can you just start by giving us just a bit of an overview of the project and what you were kind of intending behind it, which has now kind of turned into a business of sorts, I think. So, and yeah, just
That's
start
exactly
with that.
right.
Yeah. And then, you know, I'll ask you some more specific things just about the build process and what you've been up to and where you're headed this year. But yeah, just what's the mission? How did it start? And yeah.
Oh, we started where this was just a little bit of a side hustle. We're interior designers. We've been designing for a long time. We do lots of $1 million homes, and that all sounds really glamorous and exciting. But at some point, we wanted to be part of something like bigger and better, and we wanted to work with our hands. So we thought, oh, let's build a tiny home on spec. So the idea was we would build the most beautiful tiny home in Australia, and we would sell it for a profit. Well, we got our hands on some tools.
We did.
And we became part of the tiny home. And we were hooked. We fell in love.
We fell in love with the power tools.
Yeah. And the mission. So now we were like, no, this is our full-time business. And we went from not just throwing the home on Facebook to sell for profit to going to the Tiny Home Expo in
September.
Yeah, in Brisbane.
Last year.
And then also the one down in Gosford, which is Central Coast, and showcasing our tiny home for sale. And we now have 5 different designs. We're building the next prototype and ones for clients who've taken orders. Like now we're like, how grown up does that sound? Like we take orders for tiny homes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're starting one for a beautiful client. It's getting delivered. The Cassie's getting delivered on Friday or Monday. So yeah,
we're back on the tools again.
Yeah, we're tradie ladies, we're designers, and we're now full-fledged businesswomen. business owners.
Business owners. Yeah.
Oh, you're doing all the adult things. I love it. It sounds so fun. And I really
We are adulting big time.
You are.
To the best of our ability.
I know. I think we're always trying to adult it and how well we do it. I really love all of that. And, I love what you guys stand for because, you bring this fun and vibrant energy to the tiny house space. And I think also a unique point of view and a unique, I guess, way of being as you're both women. And we know that in the tiny house space, it is predominantly men as tiny house builders, which is obviously great, but it's so nice to bring, I think, things in from the perspective of women. And I'm curious just about the build process and all of that because, as I mentioned before, like you guys were at the start of the build process when we spoke. So I'm wondering, like, how long did that process take? And then did it come out as you wanted it to? Or, did it maybe even exceed your expectations?
I think it exceeded our expectations.
Yeah, 100%. It actually... we were mentally prepared for things to go wrong, for us to get things wrong. And it was really seamless.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm going to knock on wood right now so as not to jinx us, but it was a beautiful build process. Everything pretty much went our way. Any little mistakes we made were quite small and easily remedied. It took us about 5 months, but I went to America for 3 weeks and we didn't get anything done. And that was with us. That was only like 3, maximum 4 days a week. So that's why now when we sell to people, we sort of say 120 days. We possibly could even do it quicker, but we're kind of erring on the side of caution to allow for, weather and things like that. So honestly, I wish I could tell you some horror stories, but
we didn't have any.
Yeah.
Apart from when I blew away with the air blower.
I think I saw that video. That made me laugh so much. Oh my goodness.
I actually, in my mind, didn't think that I was going to. Sorry, I've got a visitor. In my mind, I didn't think it was going to blow that hard. So I was kind of shocked. But I think that's kind of like the worst thing that happened was that I nearly blew Chris's head off with the blower. She was a good sport.
Oh, I loved your reaction with that, Cris. I do remember that video now that you're talking about it. That's so good. And that's another aspect that, like I mentioned before, you guys just bring so much fun to all the building process, but obviously just everything that you do, you can really feel and see that with you guys. I'm curious about, with the original design that you had, did anything change during the building process, like from the original design to any features that you had to adapt or adjust or anything like that?
We had to cut back. What did we have to cut back? Our windows.
Yeah.
We were 5 centimeters over or something.
It's just little things that were easily remedied. Like louver windows are actually thicker than normal windows. Who knew?
Yeah.
And so, as you're very restricted to that 2.45 on the road. So technically, if our louver window frame stuck out a little bit, that we'd be illegal. So
we cut it back.
Yeah, we hacksawed into it. This is the benefit of, I'm not trying to toot our own horn, but as interior designers, we've got that many years experience of visualizing and then documenting and planning. So it pretty much looked exactly like we wanted. And some of the things, what I'm so proud of, and I owe it all to Bryh, is there was some brave things we did, like putting decorative stair risers, where I said, are people going to hate this? We were bold in a lot of ways. We've got emerald green doors, a vintage vanity. We've got what looks like sort of Portuguese tiles on the stair risers. Like, are people going to hate this and just think, because Australians love modern. They love modern. They're like, white.
And let's have some white and some more white.
Yeah. And on the outside, let's make it black and timber.
Yeah. And we might throw an arch in there somewhere.
Yeah. And so we did things completely the way we would like them. And it blew people's minds. When we went to the expo, people were like, oh my God, I've never seen any tiny home that looks like this. I don't even see homes that look like this. It feels so different. Everybody remembered us, and like things like those stair stickers, which I wasn't going to do, and Bryh said we're doing it.
We're doing them.
Like let people hate them, but be memorable. Like rather than going down the elevator music in beige that doesn't offend anybody, but also doesn't please anybody. It was an absolute hit. So I think that's what just made our day. It was like, okay, being bold, being brave, being unique, taking some chances on the design and not just copy. Like, oh, well, that's what these people are doing, so let's do that. Was hugely rewarded by the reaction at the expos.
Yeah, and even still to this day, like we had a meeting this morning and a phone call this morning, and both people we spoke to are like, this is the most, I was looking at other tiny homes and I really love them. And then I seen yours and oh my goodness, it's the most beautiful tiny home in Australia. Like, so we still get people saying that to us now, and we're like, so we did name it well with it being the most beautiful tiny home in Australia.
So for those people who didn't hear our first podcast, we set as a goal to build the most beautiful tiny home in Australia, which was like pretty immodest, but I was like, why not? Let's be audacious in our goals.
Yeah, reach for the stars.
And people literally said that to us at the show. Yep. Even God love our Faye, who organizes the Tiny Home Expo, said, I've been in every in Australia, and you ladies have built the most beautiful tiny home. So onwards and upwards.
Yeah,
we're gonna build a few more.
Yeah. It's not just beautiful, it's practical as well. Like, it's a practical living space that is beautiful.
Which leads into another thing which I find interesting. A lot of people who walked in, and we can share actually some of the reactions because they might inform some of your listeners. Yeah, like one of them was just that, like, so many people walked in and they'd say, oh, this is all you need.
Yeah.
Or and just that they suddenly realized, like, people who were maybe on the fence about tiny home living, they walked in and like, why would you need any more than this? That we heard that so many times. We also heard like, oh my gosh, it's so light, bright, and airy. And they talked about how their homes that they lived in whilst bigger were like dark and depressing, and ours was just everywhere you looked, like looking out a window and connecting with nature, and that you didn't actually need a voluminous space, to not feel closed in. So that was really interesting.
Yeah. And it feels bigger than what it is.
Yeah.
Lots of good feedback. I think that's kind of how we organically grew into a tiny home building company, because of the feedback along the way that we got. And then once it was complete, people wanted it.
Yeah. And hearing a lot about what people want that our tiny home wasn't. Hands down, the biggest thing people requested was, can you do this?
With no stairs.
No stairs, single level. So that necessitates going a bit bigger. Like the first prototype was 2.45 by 7.2. So it means going up to 9, but not having the double loft space. And we met that many women their 50s and 60s who said, this is what I want, but when I'm 85, I cannot go up those stairs and sleep in a loft. And I want this, but on a single level. So that's the very first thing we sort of came home, put pen to paper, and designed.
Want to grow old gracefully in as a forever home.
Yeah, totally. And that's an interesting point, because as far as I know, I mean, I don't know the exact statistics, but it seems to be that a large part of the demographic of people looking towards tiny house living, I think especially with the housing crisis going on, but even just I think over the years, has been women in their 50s and that kind of thing. And so I have seen the popularity and the demand of the ground level without the lofts, the ground level tiny house become more popular. So that's great that you guys are looking at doing that too, because I think there are a lot of people, even though lofts can be fun and there's a place for them, and some people really like them. I mean, I have 2 lofts in my tiny home. It's definitely not going to be for everyone. Yeah. I think I saw you guys have got like probably a loft video or something I'm recalling, but yeah, exactly. And it means that it makes it more accessible for people. And I think what I was also hearing when you were just sharing about the response that you got from people like, oh, this is all that you need. And what it seems like you ladies are doing too is you're showing people like what's possible with tiny living, because there can be this perception out there that it's, oh, you know, you're just going to be living in this small space like a caravan and blah, 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 you know, all the things. And it's like, no, actually, you can still have a really beautiful home that you love to be in, that is, you know, physically beautiful, but also has a really nice energy. You have everything that you need. And as you mentioned before, also like a practical and functional space as well. And to be able to do it differently, because I do agree there are like, because the space is being flooded by tiny house builders, and I'm, you know, being contacted by new tiny house builders all the time to come on the show and or just asking questions and stuff. There seems to be, I think a lot of people are influenced by each other, and sometimes some of the designs, and this is not a criticism at all, but some of the designs can be like quite similar or look, you know, you see the same things happening over and over and over again, especially like some different features. And so you ladies are doing it a bit differently. And I love that you have that unique stamp of an experience of being interior designers too. So yeah, it's no surprises what kind of response and feedback that you got. And it's nice to know that you achieved your goal of building the most beautiful tiny house in Australia. I love that. And I'm just curious as well, because I know you probably had many lessons that you've learned along the way. So are there any kind of big key lessons that stand out for you?
For me, it's probably when you do insulation, make sure you cover up, because Cris and I did not. When we did the insulation, I'm pretty sure we had minimal clothing on. And then we did the insulation, and suddenly we're like, oh my gosh, so itchy. And our builder mix like, oh yeah, that's a day for like a week.
Yeah, pretty bad.
That's a really good lesson to learn.
Actually, if you do insulation, you cover up from head to toe.
Head to toe. Like goggles, absolutely everything.
Were you guys wearing like shorts and a singlets or something?
Tops on,
yeah,
like shorts.
Ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. And I'm pretty sure our builder was watching us do it,
laughing.
going, these idiots.
At least it would have been entertaining. Yeah. What about yourself, Cris?
I was quite lazy in not protecting our floor after we laid it down and thinking that we could just paint neatly and like do things neatly. Oh my God.
I had to follow her around with a cloth.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. Like, just invest in that cardboard that you cut and you like tape down, just because I didn't want to spend 2 hours going and getting it and taping it down. Oh, I just cost Bryh like probably 8 hours of cleaning.
8 hours on her hands and knees following Cris around, picking up all her spots.
Yeah.
That is so funny.
So it's sort of like little things like that where, you just kind of don't know.
Yeah. And also like a lot of people, like a lot of the topics around tiny home that we've discovered, we didn't even know it was such a big topic when we started this, was weight. So, gosh, weight. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about
weight.
Okay, so most of the trailers, and unless you spend like $30,000, are rated to 4.5 ton. It's very hard to build a tiny house that is 4.5 ton. We can now do it. Like, we are changing our cladding, we're changing a couple things. And for this one, we couldn't have all our styling items and our fridge. We were so naive. We threw the deck in there thinking, we're like, nope, got to pull that stuff back out, put it on the back of the tow truck, transport it, and then put your styling and your furniture and your fridge and things like that back in. So through a lot of research and think about every single thing, like, can you shave something down from 11 mil to 9 mil, etc. We've achieved it now, but we think there's a lot of tiny homes out there that are definitely overweight. And the problem is then when you go to, say, register it in New South Wales, you need to weigh it. Yeah, so it just opens up a can of worms. So we now commit to people that we give them a weight certificate, and we've got this like amazing new cladding that hardly weighs anything and never needs to be painted. It's beautiful. And but we just had to push the envelope because we did what other people do, right? Like, looked and went, oh, other people are using this, so that must be okay. We'll use this, but it isn't.
It's
so
not.
Instead, from here forward, we're blazing our own path. We are never going to rest on our laurels and stop inventing and stop looking for new, better, superior materials. And yeah, people are now, strangely, even though we're the new kids on the block, we are getting copied left, right, and center.
Yeah, we are.
Really?
Insane. And we take it to it's a little upsetting at first because if we get ideas, we make sure we get them from overseas builder. We don't take ideas from Australian builders, but they are 100% taking ideas from us. But that's okay because
it's a compliment.
It's a compliment. And the thing is, with each buyer, we are going to design it for them. So it's like if they want black and white stair risers, if they want a different bench top, if they want us to match their house with their cladding, it's not going to be like, oh, pick color scheme A, B, or C. We're actually going to treat them like we would any interior design client, do a mood board for them, personalize it so that no two of our tiny homes will ever look the same. So we don't think like they can copy all they want.
They'll have a lot of keeping up to do.
It'll be they'll be like eating us behind us. It's okay. Like in the end, we think we're providing such a service and making it so special for each buyer that it doesn't matter if somebody copies our windows or some little idea that we've engineered. So
yeah, and I guess, it is a compliment, but I guess at some point you're like, especially if it happens again and again and again. But I think that like you guys have got the right attitude around it too, because you're just really focusing on like what you're doing and trying to be, at the cutting edge and just giving the customer, a beautiful tiny home that is unique to them. So I love that. And I guess just one last question before we move into a bit more about your tiny houses and what you're doing now and what your plans are for the year ahead. But just we were talking before about just some of the things that you learned. And so I'm curious, are there any like skills or parts of the building experience where you've learned that either of you should not be put in charge of next time?
We are never We are never putting up a ceiling again.
No.
I will somebody to put up a ceiling. This is not meant for women above the age of 40. I don't think it's meant for women above that.
I don't think it's meant for anyone.
It's just not meant. It is like the most insanely taxing, difficult job to hold sheets up, glue them, screw them. Oh, we pre-drill them and then screw them. Like now, never putting a ceiling up again.
I think we were almost about to quit after putting the ceiling up, and that's like kind of right at the start. Like we were dead. We were like, wow. I actually even did better than Cris on that day.
I think we'll probably outsource painting the exterior. And that is for like a real someone like, I'm a good painter, but I've only ever painted interiors, right? So anybody's doing it themselves. Oh my gosh, exterior, like the sun and the heat or wind or dust. Like I was like, oh my gosh, like one day it's too hot.
Yeah.
And so it's drying before you like rolling, and then it does this weird stuff. And then if it's too cold, it's drippy. And then if it rains before the paint is set, I'm like, oh, I just can't fight with the weather with painting exterior. Inside, no problem. We'll do that.
Well, we've got fancy new cladding.
We don't even
need to paint the outside. We got fancy new lightweight cladding.
Yeah, that's
amazing.
What do you call it? It's powder coated.
Yeah.
So
you'll never have to paint it again.
Yeah. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we need to hear more about that in a second. I would love to just know, like, on the back of the Tiny Homes Expos, I know, and you're talking about how you've been building for a few different customers. You've got some new designs and all of that. So what is the new direction for you now that you've become tiny house builders? What's the plans for this year?
Well, we like to think that we're more than tiny home builders. We're like a tiny home service.
Yes. Yep. So we will, we start out by literally sending people on a weekend away through Tiny Away. So if they pay a deposit just to make sure that they experience a tiny home and that they like what they like and what they don't like, we will call their local council and gather information for them. We'll put them in touch with our financing guy. We'll put them in touch with our insurance agent. We'll put them in touch with the Bryh who puts together people who have land. So we are now also doing little tiny modulars so we can self-certify and organize local builders for them. Literally, our goal is to take all of the stress off of them, put it on us, and look after them from woe to go, like look after the whole process. Like, granted, I'm not saying we are doing all these things, but we'll be matchmakers. We won't just leave them to research everything and then we just drop it off. You know what I mean? And be like, oh, check yes, hope it fits, there's no problems with delivery. We'll like do a little video with them to make sure that there isn't going to be problems with delivery. And so we kind of had to ask ourselves, like, okay, is it enough that we're building a more beautiful tiny home, or do we need to differentiate ourselves even more? And so this is our way of differentiating. And then, yeah, we can tell you more about the new designs, which were very much a response to what people asked for at the show.
Yeah, the 2 shows, we did our like research, and this is how our new designs came about, was from people's feedback.
Yeah.
Yeah, would love to hear more about the designs, because you talked about a ground level design too with no loft. So yeah, but if you want to share more about those.
Yeah, sure. So one is very close to this design, but no loft. So it just gets a bit longer. The roof becomes like a beautiful pitched roof with vaulted ceilings inside. The next one is actually what we call our Airbnb model, which is low on storage, high on luxury. So it's like a hotel suite with like really luxury finishes. You can fit a king bed in there. There's hardly any kitchen. There's not much wardrobe, but instead you just get all the space, tons of glass. So we picture, somebody's probably putting this in a pretty nice location. So that's our Airbnb model. And then what else do we have?
We've got our office.
Yeah, home office, which is, again, little home office pods have been around for a while, like, right? So we're like, what can we do that's different? Well, we just don't want it to look like someplace that you get work done at home, right? Away from the kids, away from the noise, but you'd never want a client to come. Instead, we are building what is the equivalent of like a fancy schmancy office, like with beautiful timber veneer cladding inside and floating shelves and big picture windows and beautiful like doors that all peel back and vaulted ceilings and
like a luxurious meeting space.
Yeah, like with a built-in leather banquette seat. So it's like, okay, well, you're going to work at home. You're putting this thing in your backyard. What if you live in a $3 million house? Do you really just want a shed that you work out of? I don't think so.
Yeah.
So yeah, the home office.
And then the modular.
So we know, as with Queensland's, Anastasia Palaszczuk came out in November, and they basically approved secondary dwellings. No need to get building approval or material change of use. All you needed was a building approval. We saw an amazing opportunity to provide that. So in suburban areas, it's up to 40 square meters. In semi-rural, it's up to 80. We are already doing one that's 80 for a client. And in that case, instead of being on wheels, it goes on little pier foundations. It gets delivered on skids. We've educated a lot of people about this. The upside is there's no weight issue. It can be it's bigger. You save the cost of the trailer, but that mostly gets eaten up by the cost of certification, a crane delivery, and putting in pier foundations, but it's not far off. So, if you don't need it to be on wheels, and then it increases the value of your property, but it's still adhering to the kind of tiny home principles. It's just not tiny home on wheels. So, every council is different. In some councils, it makes way more sense to get a tiny home on wheels.
Yeah.
But in some place like the Gold Coast, it makes way more sense to get a modular. Yeah. So that's what we had no idea. This is what we've learned since we last spoke to you. And we are so interested in this modular space, let's say 38 to sort of 70 square meters, which, for those people that are just feeling a bit squeamish about the tiny house on wheels, that's only 20 square meters, but they're done with the 5-bedroom house. We are so interested in this space.
And I love that you have different designs for different categories, because people can definitely use a tiny home for so many different purposes. I wanted to also go back to what you just shared before, Cris, just to acknowledge it about how you're talking, when someone comes to buy a tiny house from you, you guys are not just a tiny house builder, you're offering, and you also said it too, Bryh, like you're a tiny house service, and, you're going above and beyond and sort of taking a lot of the hard work or the uncertainty out of things for people. Because I know I've chatted to many tiny house builders. I haven't worked with them all, but it seems to be like there's still gaps and people are still unsure of exactly what you said before, like, well, okay, where can I park my tiny house and can I get finance? And what about building regulations or council regulations and all sorts of things? And although like this podcast and, there's other people trying to sort of create resources, I think if you've got like all of that in one place, especially if you're working with a specific builder, and then you can kind of just help them navigate that process, while you're building, and then for when the tiny house is ready. I think it is such a beautiful service that you're offering. I feel like it makes a big difference. So I just wanted to acknowledge that because I think that's really beautiful. Yeah. And just taking that extra care.
We're trying to be a portal for making this
easy,
a reality for people, and easy. It's not that we're so big we do everything, but we know everybody who does everything. So why would we just let people fend for themselves? Why not help connect them with whoever they need to connect with?
We're happy to hold hands and skip through the process with a few giggles along the way.
Exactly. I think it's so great to be able to see like what the most frequently asked questions are, because it is all these topics that we just mentioned before, and just being able to point people in the right place rather than like having to, get online, and it's quite overwhelming. So yeah, I really love that you guys are focusing on that too and sort of adding that to what you do. How much customization is possible for people? Because you spoke before about how like, none of your tiny houses are going to be exactly the same, because you can make them unique for people. But what's the extent of customization that people can do with your tiny homes?
Your wish is our command.
That's it. Well, okay. So here's to break it down more simply. If you can change everything aesthetic about our existing plans with no charge. If you want us to design a floor plan and layout that is actually like different framing, different windows and doors, if that makes sense, that means we need to hire an engineer. So we do charge $1,500. It's actually less than the engineer costs. We charge $1,500 to start that design process and do whole new floor plans and elevations for you. But if you then buy, that's applied towards the cost of the tiny home. But if you don't, then we're not totally out of pocket for having given that time and money to our engineer. So we think that's pretty fair.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's really good to know. And will you be also doing like different off-grid options and other special add-ons like that people can select from?
We do that now. And we've got some indication of pricing when people request on our website and they request information. What we don't just put package prices, because every single person is completely different. As you well know, like off-grid toilet. Okay. That's compost toilet, $2,000 to $4,000. A dry flush toilet, that's $2,500. Incinerator toilet, $7,000 to $9,000. Septic system, $10,000. So we wait to hear what they need. And then you get into solar. Well, we're doing a solar package for somebody who's in the Southern Highlands, where it goes from below, like from 0 to 40 degrees. So that battery and solar requirement is totally different from somebody in Queensland. So are they hooked into mains, but they want to boost it with solar? Like, are they living there full time? Is it Airbnb? Do they have a big flat screen TV? We literally have to interview people. Then we don't know anything about solar. We literally give that information to, are they going to have a shed that the solar panels can go on? I don't know, we've just learned this. Your typical 7.2 tiny house is not big enough for sort of 12 solar panels, especially if you have a skylight. So it needs to either go on a rack, or if they're going to build a little shed to store stuff or put their car, it can go on top of the shed. So that's why it's like no two off-grid packages are ever the same. And that's what we want to tell people is we can certainly help them understand what the range is. Solar might be kind of 10 to 20,000. And we just talked about toilets, but their custom package should, and any tiny home builder that they're dealing with should be really tailoring that to them. So they're not paying $1 more than they need to.
Absolutely. And it'll also depend on like what kind of appliances people have too, because obviously things that you use for cooking, like ovens and stoves and if people are using toasters, hair dryers, kettles, all sorts of things, it's definitely going to be like completely different, their needs for, how big the solar system is. And you're right, Cris, in saying that, tiny roof is not big enough. A side note here from experience of doing my own research for solar for my tiny, speaking to a few different companies, when I got quotes, often they say, this is actually an undersized system for what's possible with your tiny home roof, like the space of the roof, especially like you said, with having a skylight too. So those external options of like a rack or a ground mount or even a trailer, and that it is completely different for everyone. Because it's easy to go, what's the best solar system, and what brands and what are people using and all of that, but it's got to kind of come from your requirements. And I guess a side note on that, if you're listening and you're wondering a bit more about just, how to go about calculating your solar needs and just more information on off-grid solar, you can check out episode number 14 with Matt Porter from SAE Group up in Southeast Queensland. So I'll put a link in the show notes for that. And you mentioned, so you had a client there in the Southern Highlands. So I'm assuming, are you shipping all around Australia?
Yeah, so we will ship wherever you want it to go, basically.
So good. And do you guys have are you going to have a showroom or something like that, where if someone's in the local area, or maybe they just wanted to come and take a trip out to you to see, you've got like a display model, and what are your plans for all of that?
So we did sell our display model, but we will be building a new prototype.
We're building the single level.
Yeah, we're going to build that.
And we just had a conversation about this morning.
Yeah.
Please, anybody who wants to comment, let us know. So we have this wild idea, which is where we build is really beautiful. Like there's a boat ramp and a river and cane fields, and it's like 10 minutes from the beach. And we're like,
view of Mount Warning.
Yeah. What if we parked it there and then made it available for Airbnb, and people could come stay in it if they want, but we'll only rent it out a certain amount of times, so we've got plenty of other times to show them through. But then there's people can actually stay in it. So that's our wild new idea of how to make the most out of our prototype.
Oh, that's a good option. I feel like that's something that would be different to what other builders are doing too, because often you can maybe just go in to have a look at their display model, but not necessarily actually stay in it. So that's really cool.
Become our Airbnb, stay in a big life tiny home.
Yeah.
And tell us what you think.
Yeah. And also I guess they can kind of, depending on where they are in the country, also just maybe make a little trip out of it, which would be fun too. I love that.
We literally have people who say, I'm coming up that way, I'm going to be on the Sunshine Coast. It's like a big drive. Like imagine if stay the night,
We'll take you out to lunch, then you can stay in the tiny home, and then we'll talk about it.
So watch this space. You might try to do that.
Yeah, that's so good. Okay. Yeah. Watch this space. And okay, so if someone is wanting to work with you ladies, what does the process look like as a customer?
I sound so cliche saying this, fill out the contact form online or just give us a call. I think last weekend we had 5 different conversations with people. We will spend a little bit of time on the phone with you, literally just listening and getting to know you, because that determines whether we're your people. We will not hesitate to send you to another tiny home builder if we feel like we're not your people. And you know what? Other tiny home builders have been really supportive of us and sent people to us. So we just want to get to know people, where they're at, why they're doing this, where they are in the process, what their budget is, what their timeline is, what their dream is. And then we go away. Some people are maybe 6 to 12 months away from making a decision. The woman we met this morning was ready to go. So we're sending her a contract this afternoon, but we have lunch with people. We're not here to just email you stuff. Let's chat. Let's get to know you.
I love that. Making it a more personal experience, which I think is, making it a more of an experience for people, and knowing that, you're finding out, how you can best serve them. And
we're leading with that. Rather than being I'm going to send you some information and make you ask me questions. I'm going to sell you something, and then I might be nice and get to know you. We're how about we get to know you, figure out if we believe that we have a solution for you, and then we'll sell your tiny house.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to do
and
it.
then
you
you'll
know?
have two best friends for life after you buy a tiny home from us, whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
You're stuck with them whether you like it or not. I love it.
Yeah, they're your besties now.
Oh, that's so good. You know, you're talking about the weight before and then the dimensions. And I think from what I know, just speaking to different builders, that there's the caravan standards, because obviously there's no specific regulations for constructing a tiny house, but then there's also the National Construction Code, but that only technically applies to fixed dwellings, you know, without being on a trailer and all of that. Yeah, so I'm just curious about what spec your builds are building
Definitely to building standards. So for example,
like it's less a mini mansion.
It's a mini mansion.
And it's being built like that.
Over and above with insulation. We do not do cheap windows and doors. We do not do cheap hardware. Like, we're going over and above. I have to say, after our tiny home, I got to brag. I get, traveled to Brisbane and back. I traveled to Sydney and back. Like, barely a crack. It held together so beautifully. And because we've thought about every single material.
That was all my gapping.
Yes, every single silicone joint. So they get abused more than a house. So it's got to be better than a house, So that's sort of the standard we're going to.
Oh, beautiful. Okay. That's good to know. Yeah. And I think the last time when you were on the show, you talked about how you were starting your YouTube channel. So do you want to let everyone know a little bit about that? And I know you're sharing stuff on your Instagram page as well, but did you end up using the name? What was it again? Was it Shazza and the Shitty Shed Show or something?
Shazza and Snippets from the Shitty Shed Show. Yeah, I love it.
That was a troll, by the way.
It was we got trolled.
I know. I remember you talking about that in a video or something, and I was like, you know what? Like, even though you got trolled, that's pretty hilarious, like, and quite entertaining.
The best trolling ever. I was like, we should make a series out of this.
We left the first one on YouTube almost like a series, and we've just been brainstorming maybe a new opening, almost like a sitcom, for our next build, which starts in a week. So
because we're not clueless anymore, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we'll be sharing our expertise, but we promise to continue to be silly.
Yes.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be the same if you weren't, And I don't know,
we're not actually acting when we're doing that. We're actually just being ourselves. So I really don't think that it can be any other way unless we change who we are.
Exactly. And that's what I love about you guys. And I think that's why you're resonating with a lot of people, is that you can tell that you're literally just being yourselves. And, you have this really cool and fun dynamic between you. You can laugh at yourselves. You laugh at each other. By the looks of what I've seen in your videos too, you also make other people laugh at, your antics and stuff. And I think that that's just really, it's refreshing. So I love that. And I really reckon that you should buy the domain for the Shitty Shed Show, because maybe it might come in handy down the track.
Don't give us any more ideas. We'll just take it and run with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can thank the troll for that one.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. Well, I reckon maybe Shazza might be you, Bryh, just because of the Aussie kind of thing,
Yeah.
Don't you reckon?
Yeah.
Like, it's such an Aussie slang kind of name, like Shazza. I don't know. I mean,
I think it was an American that actually trolled us, because then they started saying something about like quiches, or like, what was those American names they were throwing at us? Like Letitia, or like they were throwing other words around, and they were just very American. I'm like, I wonder if these people are American.
Yeah.
Like, they probably don't even know what Shazza is.
Yeah.
Well, it was funny.
But they just know that we're not Kazzas, that's all.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you're not Kazza. Thank you to the troll for that one. And so as we start to close out the conversation, ladies, is there anything you feel like you wanted to share more about, the direction that you guys are heading this year, or about, your tiny house builds, your tiny house service?
No, just that we're super open to conversations. Like, we prefer if you not troll us, but we're actually open to we're open to criticism. We're open to having conversations. We're open to talking to you, even if you're like 2 years away from buying. If you want to just like ask us questions or see what's possible or push us in a direction that we haven't thought of, like we are going to pivot to what the market wants, and the market being you. Whoever's listening to this and thinking about doing it, talk to us. And like I said, we'll try to point you in the right direction. If not, we'll have a bit of a laugh and a good conversation.
Yeah. And if you do want to troll us, you just have to be warned that I will troll you back.
Yes. We will run with it and laugh.
So we just want all the creative trolls out there.
Yes, creative trolls that come up with things like Shazza and Shit Lips, the Shitty Shed Show. Yeah.
So good. And you can't say that too fast either, because otherwise it doesn't come out.
I know, it doesn't come out properly. Yeah. Oh, it's so funny. Okay. Yeah, that's amazing. Thank you so much for saying all of that. And I think it's just great to know that you're very approachable, and that people, if they're curious about, what's possible for their own tiny house life or whatever purpose they're going to use a tiny house for, that they can come and speak to you ladies. So that's great. And do you want to let everyone know where is best that they can come and find you online, or just come and check out what you're doing?
Yeah. Okay. So the website is Big Life Tiny Home, all one word, and it's not plural, .com.au. Bryh, what's our Instagram?
Our Instagram is biglife.tinyhome, and that's the same across all our socials.
So there's a dot in between, otherwise you'll go to somebody else's page. So different people like to interact in different ways. Yeah. And we're open for conversation at any of those places, or just give us a call.
We love a chat.
Beautiful. I know you do. And I will put a link in the show notes at tinyhouseconversations.com to where people can reach you. And just want to say thanks so much again to both you ladies, Cris and Bryh, for joining us on the show today. It's been great to chat with you as always. I love the fun that you bring, and I just love what you're doing in the tiny house space. And it's really nice to see that you're, really trying to provide a service and best serve people as you can, and you're doing things differently. And it's just really nice to see things being done from the perspective of women, and I think we need more of that. So thank you for your time today as well.
Awesome. Thank you,
Thank you so much, hon. Until next time.
Yeah. And I can't wait to see what you get up to, and the progress that you have this year, and all the best with that. Because actually, so I just want to say this too, like I think another reason why I just love watching what you ladies do is you make it really entertaining as well. And I haven't done it in a little while, but there were times where I kind of like missed out on what you guys were doing and stuff, because I was so busy, and then I'd see you come up online, and then I'm like, I need to go back, like binge watch some of your videos, and it's just always really entertaining and funny. Yeah.
People told us they did that. They'd watch one and they'd be like, I made my husband watch all your videos.
Yeah, we even had a husband say that he made his wife watch all our videos. He's like, you got to check these ladies out. But we have been a little quiet on socials because we have had our head down, bum up in design phase.
Yeah, and Christmas.
And Christmas and all that jazz. But once we're back on the tools, our tune in, our Shitty Shed show will start again for sure.
Stay tuned for the Shitty Shed show. I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much again, ladies. And if you're listening to us at home, thank you so much for being here as always. Make sure you go check out Big Life Tiny Home on Instagram, the website. Again, the links will be at tinyhouseconversations.com. And stay tuned every Thursday for new episodes of Tiny House Conversations. I'll see you next time. Thanks again for listening. And if you enjoyed the conversation today, you found it valuable, and you want to support the podcast, the best way you can do that is to share the love. That way I can keep bringing you more tiny house conversations to help you on your own tiny journey. So here are 3 ways that you can support the podcast. Number 1, if you have a friend or family member that you feel would benefit from hearing these conversations, feel free to share it with them, email them, text them, send them a telegram, do whatever you need to do to share it with them. Number 2, if you hit the subscribe button, you'll know exactly when the next episode is live. And number 3, if you head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to podcasts and leave a 5-star rating and review. Thank you so much in advance. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next episode.